Got it.
Okay. Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to have Elena Pancino again in Bologna. I think most of you know her very well since she spent a lot of time here. She got her degree in Padova and then her PhD in astronomy here in Bologna, and after a couple of years she became a researcher at Osservatorio Astronomico in Bologna. I think back in 2004, something like that.
Yes.
I was already here.
Yeah, I remember.
Then in 2016, she moved in Florence in the Osservatorio Astrofisico di Arcetri, where she's now, and she's also appointed as a professor at the University of Florence, where she's giving courses on stellar
evolution and nucleosynthesis.
Right.
So.
And she has some very, very important role in many surveys. As a member of coordinator of Gaia Deepak and also in Gaia ISO. She was one of the builder of Gaia ISO survey, and also for the calibration part. She's involved also in the WIV, in MOOCs for the galactic survey, always again for the part relevant to calibration and the standard stars of this surveys, and also Mosaic.
Yes, Mosaic, science working group coordinator.
And she also has found time to work at this. I think it's important to work the survey of survey, because there are so many surveys and the spectroscopic, and I think many data, and very interesting, but also a bit of a mess. And so I think Elena and her group are trying to make some order and homogenize these results. So I leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Donatella. Thank you everybody for having me here. It's always emotionally strong to be here again. So I will talk, as Donatella said, about the survey of surveys. But first, come si muove? Prima funzionava, sorry. So this talk should have been given, a couple of months ago, and it was cancelled because Antonio passed away. So when I opened up the talk again and I saw the pictures I had put at the time when I was preparing the talk, I really felt a strong emotion, and how can I say, the rejection at the idea of giving this talk here without him in the observatory. So I will try to do my best to give a professional talk, but okay, already emotion starts to come up because it's very early. And they told me that this room will be entitled to him. And that was very good news. I was very happy to hear about it. And at the time I was figuring out a way to justify the idea that I was giving a talk in spite of the fact that he was not there anymore. And so this is what I found here, because we were all exchanging, ideas, facts, memories, and the fact that Antonio had this habit to enter the office of someone with very strange questions, provocative and deceptively naive. And one of the questions, this was reported by Giacomo Beccari, was, if we're all doing stellar abundances, why there isn't a telescope that produces abundances directly instead of spectra, so we don't work so much? And this is, I like this because it gives the idea that the burden of deriving reliable data to use for doing astrophysics from the spectra at the moment is on the surveys themselves, on the spectroscopic surveys themselves. With the survey of surveys, we are trying to remove the last bit in which people have to combine all of the surveys together. So in a sense, it is not such a naive question if you think about it. It is a need that we have as a community. So then concerning the motivation, okay, this is all quite obvious to those who work in this field. I'm focusing on stellar astrophysics, although the extragalactic community has been doing surveys starting earlier than us. So they have more tradition in this. But in the last 10 years, we have been doing a huge amount of surveys, space missions, which produce what in the grant proposal writing language is called the data deluge, right? So such a huge amount of data that is impossible for any single team to make efficient and comprehensive use of all of them together. And there are very few teams who have the human resources, the expertise, the computer resources, the funds to do that extensively. And why is this so? Because, of course, we have different types of surveys with different expertise and communities involved, like photometry, spectroscopy, astroseismology, astrometry. And focusing now on spectroscopy, we have surveys that cover the southern, the northern hemisphere, different depth, different targets, signal to noise resolution, data quality, passbands, wavelength ranges, you name it. So there is a variety, not to mention the formats and the methods for the analysis. And therefore, this is why one would ideally desire a whole single catalog, which is, however, reliably compiled. So the survey of survey, I mean, would serve exactly this need. So a critically compiled by people who know the type of data that are in the surveys, made as homogeneous as possible, accurately calibrated, and obtained by combining all, well, in the future, all of the spectroscopic surveys together and free to use by everyone. Okay, so this is the idea. I mean, the team is a vague thing. I wrote here some of the most present people, but I mean, the interest by several teams is large. So there is the Arcetri team, where I am, where we are 5 people. We work basically on producing and validating the catalog. And this is built because, as Donatella said, I have a lot of experience in inter-calibration. And therefore, I can use that experience to do this work and to guide people with very different expertise that you will see in a moment in doing the work. Then there is the Space Science Data Center team. They are more on the database archive and web interface production, but they also are the provider of the Gaia cross-match tool, the software that has been used to cross-match Gaia with all of the other surveys, photometric and spectroscopic. So as you can imagine, this is an important ingredient. Then there is a team at ESA. Their interest is more scientific, but they provided a lot of help in the validation of the prototype of the survey of surveys. And they also are providing alternate algorithms which we compare with to do the job. And with an eye on the future, there are also these 2 teams, the Karma and Kronos teams, which are heavily focused on stellar ages. And so the idea is that in a future, it will be perhaps possible to derive homogeneous and accurate ages from various indicators to attach to the stars that we put in the survey of surveys.
Sorry, Elena, the Space Science Center is based where?
It is in Rome, in ASI, yeah, and it is financed by INAF, the NFN, and ASI itself. And it contains data from several missions, multi-wavelength data. It's a legacy archive, but they also provide tools and support to the community. And the reason why I collaborate with them is because of Gaia, because they are one of the Gaia partner data centers.
ESA doesn't take them of right? No.
ESA in this? No. Well, they produce Gaia data. I mean, it's not negligible, but not direct collaboration. It's some well, the politics in using the data is complex, so it's better to wait for the data to be public to do this for such a small team like we are, no? So, and why are we doing it? No, because why this service to the community, investing so much effort to do something so simply altruistic? That's because we need it for our own science. So the people I listed have science interests that fall in 3 big bins, if you wish. The first bin is the characterization of stars hosting planets. And because, you know, if you know the parameters of the stars hosting planets very well, you can also characterize better the planets themselves. So the density, for example, separating rocky from gaseous planets. If you have such a big survey, you can compare the stars with and without planets and see if there is any difference in the chemistry, which is also something they are very interested in. And last but not least, you can see whether different populations in the Milky Way perhaps have different types of planets or different amounts of certain types of planets. So what is called, again, in grant proposal writing language, the galactic habitable zone. Then there is galactic archaeology. This is obvious. All of the surveys are focused on this task. And so using today's chemistry and dynamics to reconstruct the Milky Way history. formation, assembly, and all these details. Characterizing, for example, one thing that is done a lot here in Bologna is characterizing known stellar streams. So one topic that would benefit from such a database. And when you have a big database, you can also look for rare stellar types, like very metal poor stars, or stellar types that are not so rare, but are very difficult to find if you're not running a survey. For example, spectroscopic binaries, fast rotating stars, and the like. And last but not least, the star clusters, which are, I mean, my interest since when I was a student here in Bologna, and many of you share this interest here as well. So the problem of multiple populations, non-canonical stellar populations, which is resulting from interactions among stars, the chemodynamics and structure of the clusters, their interaction with the Milky Way, and in the future, the determination of cluster ages and the age scale of the universe. So these are general interests that we have been touching in the years. They all require a large catalog of properties of stars. So how to put all of the surveys together? As I said, they're very different from each other, including in the format. And what spectroscopists have been trying to do so far is to understand the systematics between different studies. So if two studies use a different solar reference abundance or a different line list or different models, we know that there are biases that we can control and correct for before merging the data. But this is the hard way for two reasons. The first is that it works very well when you have high resolution data, spectroscopic data, but the surveys have medium or low resolution data. And so they use different techniques which are more similar to black boxes in producing the results. So it's very difficult to understand exactly what was done in the detail. And the sheer data volume prevents any possibility to apply this method. And in fact, this was applied in the Hypatia catalog, in the Saga database, in the Pastel database, which are all studies based on high resolution spectroscopy. So the other option is to do like photometrists do, so calibrate things by comparison. And that's the way we chose. So we cross-match all of the surveys with the reference set, which in this case is Gaia. We calibrate relatively onto an arbitrary system, which is defined by the surveys themselves. We calibrate the errors before merging the surveys, and when that is done, we apply an external calibration, which is exactly the calibration technique that is used for Gaia photometry, for example. So we use the same logic. Of these 4 steps, I will show one slide for each step just to give you a glimpse of the method. I don't want to go too much into the gory details of the method itself, but just to give you a feeling for it. So the first step of the method is cross-match each survey with Gaia. And we're using the Gaia cross-match algorithm, which is a bit more sophisticated than the ones present in the literature. There are many. They work very well with varying degrees of mismatch or incompleteness, which are of the order of a few % of the entire catalog, okay, depending on the astrometry and the positional accuracy. But if you lose a few % of the stars in a catalog that has 100 million, you lose the equivalent of an entire survey, just because you didn't do the cross-match right. So this cross-match is a bit more sophisticated. It uses the Gaia astrometry to propagate the motion of the stars to the epoch of the spectroscopic survey. It uses a lot of information to provide a figure of merit, and it provides a lot of output that you can use, indicators that you can use to filter out the results and have a clean sample. And for example, we use this method to cross-match each survey with itself to identify the hidden duplicates that sometimes are present. And then we use them later. I will show you how. And here you have some examples. I will focus only on 2 of them. The first is this case in which the survey has 2 stars pointing to Gaia. Because the surveys are ground-based, the resolution is 1 arcsecond. Gaia is space-based, the resolution is 5 times smaller. If you have this case, you have found a hidden duplicate. This other case, in which 2 Gaia stars point to 1 star in the survey, because of the same reason, it might mean that the star in the survey is a blend of 2 stars, and then it's not reliable. So this is extremely useful and fundamental for the rest of the work. The second step is the survey homogenization. Now, as I said, we want to bring everything to a same reference system, which is arbitrary. But how to start with? You cannot do, like, if you have 6 surveys like we have in our prototype, which is focused on the radial velocities. So I will show you plots on the radial velocities, and which has been published last year here. If you do this, you will have all of the possible pairs among surveys and a system of equations that would destroy even the most powerful computer. So the solution was to study each survey in comparison with Gaia. Because Gaia has a full sky coverage, 2 billion stars. It has many stars in common with each survey. So if you have a survey in the north and one in the south with just a little part in common, with Gaia, you can take care of that. And this is the result. Here you see the difference in radial velocity measured by Gaia and by each of the survey in a different color as a function of different parameters. And this is an example of what I mean by a multi-parametric kind of homogenization. You will see that, where is it? All of the surveys here have this slight rising trend with G magnitude. So if including Lamoste, which has a large 0 point, but has the same shape. So if you fit a second order polynomial, you get the same coefficients within uncertainties for all surveys. This means that Gaia has this trend. And this was well known. It was already published in the release papers. So we knew that it was like this, and we could use this to test that our method works well enough to recover this kind of bias. Then there is a slight bias with the metallicity, which is linear. So you first correct Gaia for these biases that you managed to find, and then you correct all of the surveys onto Gaia. Okay, and this is what we call survey homogenization. You basically remove biases, trends, and 0 points among surveys. You also may notice that all surveys fail for the hot stars because they have fewer features. The surveys don't agree with each other for metal poor stars because they have few features in the spectra. You see that there are strange trends for depending on the resolution of the survey. Lamoste here, lowest resolution of all the surveys, fails for the giants, for example. So each survey is strong in a different part of the parameter space. By having more surveys, you identify exactly which one is failing where or is strong where. The third step is merging all of the catalogs together into this Uber catalog, which is, however, on its own system that has no strong physical motivation yet. So to do this, we use the hidden duplicates in each survey that the survey is analyzed as if they were 2 different stars. And by studying the differences in radial velocity, we see if the differences, the pairwise differences normalized by the formal uncertainties actually reproduce a Gaussian with centered on 0 and the sigma 1. Okay, and they don't. I mean, it was well known that apogee was largely underestimating its uncertainties on the radial velocities. And it was also well known that Lamoste was overestimating their uncertainties. So with this, we can calibrate the errors in each survey. And why do we want to do so? Because we use weighted averages. If you use a weighted average, but the errors are on different scales, you get the lottery numbers, basically. For those surveys like the Gaia survey, which doesn't have any single duplicate, because they did a very good job in cleaning the duplicates within the survey, we use statistical methods, this 3-cornered hat method. I mean, if you have 3 data sets, you can use the differences in measurements and the spreads to recover the intrinsic uncertainty. And we also use the 3-cornered hat to verify that the numbers that we took out from this kind of analysis were compatible with the 3-cornered hat method. So once we finish this exercise, we already have a catalog that we can use to estimate our precision. And I will show you some science validation test from the paper later. But basically, the final uncertainties, I mean, we do respect the uncertainties of the single surveys. When they are observed, the stars are observed in more than one survey, we improve them, so we don't destroy what is good. And we end up with a typical precision that goes between 0.5 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers. I think that's the semi-interquartile range, if I'm not wrong, of the final errors, which are not the ones here. These are the original ones. So it's a precision that, can be used in a lot of scientific applications. Final step, our idea was, okay, we have this arbitrary set. We use a high resolution set to compute a rigid 0 point, like photometrists do, and bring everything to a more reliable scale, let's say. In reality, having based everything on Gaia, we are already, with our arbitrary system, on the Gaia radial velocity standard scale. So we found basically 0 offset. And we found the expected offset of 0.3 kilometers per second with the Geneva-Copenhagen survey, because they two use different standards, and the Gaia RV standards being more recent, use the more recent IAU standards for radial velocity measurements. And as a result, we can say, because these are the two best sets of radial velocity measurements in the literature so far to our knowledge, that our accuracy is at most 300 meters per second, which means the overall global 0 point accuracy, which is also not despicable, I would say. I mean, it can be used in a large range of applications. And here is an example of a validation test that we did with open clusters, because most surveys use clusters as calibrators. They observe many of them, and some even have as very specific scientific goals, scientific targets. And so here you see just a selection of a few open clusters where we compare the Gaia ESO survey, which I don't remember if it's the red or the blue, with the Bermillo, which was the golden standard of the radial velocity catalogs for open clusters until, I don't know, 10 years ago. Well, a bit more than 10 years ago. And we agree within 0.2 kilometers per second, which is consistent with the accuracy that I showed you before. Of course, here we're talking about the mean abundance, not the individual velocities, but that's exactly the test on the global 0 point. So we managed to obtain a data product that exceeded our expectations, to be honest. And that motivated us to go forward. And we published the paper, and so we tested the method, we tested that our resources were adequate to carry out the project, although if we include the things like weave for most, and the rest, our laptops, however powerful, will not be enough. So we will need more funds. We did some science validation, and we decided to go on with the project. The first paper, I don't know what's your experience, but in my career, I never had a paper who was cited 19 times in the first year, except for the big papers like Gaia, Gaia ESO, and the survey papers. So for such a homemade project, I would say that this type of, and with the COVID, we couldn't present it much around. So I would say that this has to be considered as a sign that the community is interested in this type of project. So they would make good use of it. And how did they use it? Here we have some statistics of the downloads. So of course, we don't have statistics from the CDS on the downloads. We only have our own statistics from the SSDC, Space Science Data Center database. And people mostly downloaded the entire catalog because it is small enough to allow for that. And they prefer to play with it on their own computer. In the papers, we noticed that most of the citations were to look for their own object or for their own little sample of objects and to check if there was a radial velocity here. So this would save people a lot of time going through each one of the surveys. And a few times the SOS was also used to validate radial velocity measurements, like they are on the same scale of the SOS, therefore of the surveys. And one time it was cited as an example of method to homogenize thing that they would want to employ in the future. So this motivated us to go further. Now, of course, we had 11 million sources. Now Gaia DR3 has 33 million. So it's like, oh, okay, people will use Gaia DR3, of course. And also the bias that Gaia had is beaten down considerably now. But Gaia doesn't go below the 14 point something magnitude. So we still have some stars that are not there compiled in one single catalog. The database, okay, this is the Gaia portal at SSDC. And you see there is a tab for the survey of surveys. You can download the catalog. You can download the individual surveys recalibrated on that system. And below here, there is a sort of query buttons that you can use. You can upload your own file, download the measurements and the like. And what I like a lot of this particular database is that you also have the full data model explained in very much detail. So here for the moment, we only have 10 columns, right? Gaia has hundreds. So having a system like this really speeds up your ability to understand what kind of data you have in hand. There are, all the limits, the units, the detailed explanation of each columns and so forth. So what are the next steps? How am I doing with time? Fine, right? Yeah. Okay. What are the next steps? Well, we started all these to have parameters and abundances. So the next natural step is having the parameters. And as a matter of fact, we already have a preliminary version that we use to homogenize radial velocities. But here you see some plots in which Maria compared the surveys with each other. And you see here, for example, the difference in temperature between Lamoste and all of the other surveys. And you see that Lamoste has a big trend, but all of the other surveys agree with each other within 100 kelvins, which for such medium resolution efforts is amazing, I'm telling you. Higher resolution studies don't go much below this in accuracy, talking about accuracy now, not precision. So, because these are running means, okay? So we can say that it will not be so difficult as one could imagine initially to homogenize these parameters. And here you have another example of metallicity. So you have the difference in metallicity between RAVE and all of the other surveys. And again, you see the same behavior. RAVE has a big trend because RAVE was a resolution like 11,000, 10,000, I don't remember. So lower than the typical survey. But Lamoste, with a resolution that is 7,000, they did an excellent job because they calibrated on apogee. So their parameters are fantastic. You see that the agreement breaks down a little bit below -1.0. This is a big problem in all of the surveys. But again, they all agree within 0.1 dex. So this is what we can expect for the SOS based on parameters. Although at the moment we just fitted, a polynomial to this to do our work, but we can do better. So what can we do better? What are the lessons learned? First of all, when you do the homogenization, you choose a polynomial, you choose a straight line, you choose an exponential. If you let the genetic algorithms do the job for you on the whole parameter space, they will tell you exactly which parameters are relevant and which are not, and which function performs better. And in a robust statistical way. So we are experimenting with this now. We are advised by a software engineer specialized in machine learning. So we are upgrading our weapons, if you like. So of course, we would like to upgrade to Gaia Deer 3, upgrade to the latest survey releases, include more data sets. For example, I don't know if you heard about the Amber data set, where they analyzed all of the spectra in the ESO archives of stars. So it would be nice to include them as well. And however, we are working now on how to choose the reference system, because for radial velocities, Gaia was fantastic. But for parameters, Gaia is like RAVE, okay, more or less. So we could choose Gaia as a reference system, but we could, we're experimenting with taking the 3 highest resolution survey and creating a reference system from them on which to homogenize everything. The problem is they don't cover the entire parameter space. So we're working on it. But for testing purposes, because this is not science grade, you can ask me the preliminary catalog and you can use it. So temperature, gravity, and metallicity. Or ask Maria, which is better because she has the last version. Now, going a bit more in the future, we have all of these photometric surveys, SDSS, PanSTARRS, LSST is coming, we have 2MASS. They have a very large number of stars, so we're talking about the stars that are parameterizable, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more stars than what you can do with spectroscopy. So imagine having, this is the field of streams of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Imagine having temperature, gravity, and metallicity reliably determined for each of these stars. To me, that would be a dream. Of course, it would not be as precise as the spectroscopic one, but still, it would be an immensely powerful database. Gaia is doing something like this, but Gaia is relying on 3 bands so far. And there is this work, you all know about this, in using synthetic photometry on the Gaia spectra to rederive all of the surveys led by Paolo and Michele, no? So we would like to do something like this, but in this case, we would like to use all of this data, which is a huge amount, so much more than what we did so far, to derive temperature, gravity, and metallicity for something like a few 100 million stars. So we can do the surveys separately and then homogenize them with the same technique that we used for the spectroscopy. So we did a little experiment on that to see whether it was reasonable or feasible. And basically, here you see some photometric temperatures minus the preliminary survey temperatures for a couple of, the entire sample was 200,000 secondary standard stars. So Lambert and Stetson with very good photometry. And so you see, they already compare quite well the temperatures from the color temperature relations with the spectroscopic ones. But for the gravities, we have some problem on the giants. And for metallicity, we are completely off for metal poor stars. And here for metallicity, I'm using the Star Horse results from 2020. Now they have improved, but still deriving metallicity from photometry for metal poor objects is extremely difficult. Right. So what did we do? We used this spectroscopic survey of surveys, the preliminary catalog I was talking about, as a training set. We used we manually tested what would be the best parameters. Now we know that there are methods because our software engineer told us that we was crazy what we did. But there are methods, machine learning methods to choose what are the most relevant parameters, including PCA, but also more complex ones. We tested like 10 different machine learning algorithms, including random forest, different types of neural networks, and so on and so forth. And we found that in this case, surface vector regression performed best, let's say. And what is the performance? This is the performance. So you see, even if temperature was good enough already, it was improved. The agreement between stars in the same main sequence and giants here. It's because gravity improved for the giants. But what is very striking is the improvement in metallicity for the metal poor stars. So we're not there yet, but we're talking about a factor of 2 or 3 better in the bias for metal poor stars, which is very encouraging. So we decided to move on with this, and now we're working, so I don't have any result to show you. We decided that the surface vector regression is not appropriate for all surveys, and we wanted a uniform method. So we're using multi-layer perceptron, which is a neural network with different hidden layers. And we have 2 motivations in the experiments we're doing now. The first is, why were we successful with the first experiment? Is it because we use the survey of surveys, so spectroscopic metallicities, to train the algorithm? Is it because the secondary standards are very accurate magnitudes? Is it because we chose the right parameters or the right algorithm? So we want to understand why we perform so much better than anybody else, virtually. And the second motivation is, of course, to test how able we are with the current resources to deliver such a product, and how much resources we would need to ask for funds for going on with this, if possible. So we're working on the SDSS, and so far we managed to reproduce what we did with the Lambert standards, but we changed the inputs, we changed the algorithm, we changed everything. So probably the answer is in the training set. So having the survey of survey as a training set, but we don't know yet for sure. And of course, well, I didn't say this here because we start to go into the dreaming section of this project, which is, okay, it's easy to attach Gaia astrometry, but also astroseismology, but also ages with the projects by Davide and Santi Cassisi, and so on and so forth. So this could become quite a useful kind of catalog if we manage to keep it going. So now I'm concluding with this slide. So the future is very easy to say. We have no money, so we cannot go on. This is why I'm trying to present this project and see if people are interested in it. Maybe we can find collaborators, so we can find ideas, we can find something to go on with the project. The wish list I already told you, update to the last version of each, so maintain the catalog updated. Crowded fields are my personal interest, so we would like to study that. Abundance rashes, other parameters like age and the like. But at this point, we really cannot go on too much. We can publish our parameters, and the abundance ratio, it depends. Okay. So, and because we don't feel that we own this project, if somebody here says, oh, but I can do the abundance ratios, they're welcome. Okay. So we're looking for collaborators. Okay. If we don't have funds, you have to have collaborators which are staff members. And so far, we have invested all our time to prepare the catalog, to test the method, and so on. In the future, we would also like to use it. So far, other people have used it, we didn't. So, and with this, I conclude. I'm sorry for the particular state of mind in which I gave this talk. I hope it was professional enough, and if you have any questions, I'm here.